Mayor, the Democratic Party in Rhode Island, it can be argued, is showing signs of splintering. Organizations like the Democratic Socialists, Working Family Party, Green Party, the uncommitted slate that went to the convention, and particularly the Party for Social Liberation with Claudia de la Cruz, is clearly attracting a great deal of passion from younger Democratic voters. Is the Rhode Island Democratic Party losing young voters, particularly over the Gaza?
That might be a question better for the party itself. I'll speak for myself and my values and my coalition. It is true, I think it was true when I was a young person, that most young voters have either more radical views or experiment with different views. I believe the Rhode Island Democratic Party and Democratic leaders in Rhode Island still appropriately reflect the values and priorities of a majority of Rhode Island voters. And I believe that our coalition is broad and it includes young people to old people, various faiths and various races and ethnicities and various geographies. So I'm not personally concerned about that. We certainly have seen activism within our own party, even on the issue of the war in Israel and what's happening to families in Gaza. But they're still within the Democratic Party, and we have a place for that sort of dissent within our party and a place for a wide variety of viewpoints. Well, good afternoon. This isn't the press conference I had hoped to be having today. I know Vice President Harris will be addressing the nation shortly, but I wanted to take this opportunity to speak directly to the residents of Providence. Yesterday, like so many of my neighbors here in the capital city, I woke up filled with hope and optimism, and I went to bed dismayed and woke up this morning shocked. Those of you who know me know that I'm not someone who exactly wears my emotions on my sleeve, but there's no denying that this is an emotional day for millions of Americans and thousands of people here in Providence. Yesterday, a majority of the country chose a candidate who ran a campaign based upon fear and division, and today we're faced with the reality of another Trump term. I know that most of us here in Providence are feeling sad, scared, and hopeless. We're worried about our families, our friends, and our neighbors. The outcome of this election isn't what we wanted, and we may be feeling powerless. But I want to take a moment to reassure the residents of Providence that we are not powerless. During the next 4 years under the Trump administration, there will be attempts to unravel our progress. And I'm here to reassure Providence that we won't let that happen. We have something special here. It's because of our diverse and vibrant communities. We don't just welcome multiculturalism, we embrace it, and we're better because of it. Over the next 4 years, we're going to strive to be a model and an example for the rest of the country. We're going to show that inclusion and compassion can make us stronger, healthier, and wealthier. We are going to look out for one another, for our neighbors, for our immigrant communities, for the women of Providence, for our faith communities, and for the rights and freedoms of every person in our city. I have a message for all of our neighbors. You are welcomed, you are valued, and you are safe. We are going to use our laws, our ordinances, our city policies, and every tool at our disposal to protect what makes this place so special and the sanctuary that it is for so many. At the same time, we're not going to be complacent. Local government is more important than ever. State government is more important than ever. Attorneys general are more important than ever. I am as motivated as I've ever been as a leader to deliver for the people of Providence, but also to lead by example. And we're going to continue to address the most pressing challenges in our city. We're going to build more homes and lower prices. We're going to continue to provide a safer city and police in a way that actually increases public safety. We're going to strengthen quality of life and invest in climate resiliency. despite a change in tune from the federal government. And let's not forget that regardless of who's in the White House, we still have the best federal delegation in the country. A delegation that was decisively reelected last night. Senators Rhode and Whitehouse, Congressmen Magaziner and Amo are going to fight for Rhode Islanders every day to both bring back resources, but also stand up for Rhode Island values. Vice President Harris is a great leader, and she ran a great campaign. She and the millions of Americans who knocked on doors, made phone calls, contributed in so many ways to her campaign deserve enormous credit for believing in the future of America, a belief that I share. And that work's not over. It's going to change a little bit. I think most of us feel like today is for grieving, but tomorrow we get back to work. So in spite of what happened last night, I absolutely still believe in the promise of our country and know that those of us here in Providence can create a safe city, a welcoming city, and can in fact be a beacon for how Democratic leadership can provide better solutions to the challenges facing families on a daily basis. Thank you.
Mayor, there was an ad that Donald Trump ran a lot toward the end of the campaign that ended with "she's for they, them, he's for you." What do you think of an ad like that, and do you think it speaks to a part of America that's, and it looks from last night, that just thinks the Democratic Party may be too progressive for them?
I think that an ad like that is exactly why so many people, including myself, are upset today, because all it does is divide us as a country and as a community. The reality is that here in Providence, we have people of all walks of life, all religions, all ethnic backgrounds, all gender identities and sexual orientations. And they are all have the opportunity to thrive here in Providence. And so that's part of why I'm doing this today, is to make sure that our friends and neighbors know that A, they're safe here, and that B, we can show to the rest of the state, to the rest of the region, and perhaps to the rest of the country that in places like Providence, where we don't use ads or divisive language or arguments like that as a way to separate us, but we can actually show that as a community we can all thrive, and it's nobody's business what someone else's sexual orientation is, it's nobody's business what someone else's gender identity is, and the government can actually provide a foundation for rights and protections that don't come at the expense of someone else's rights and protections. And so that's what I'm seeking to do today and for the next 4 years.
So just to follow up, do you think that maybe that's a reason that she lost, is that some people view the Democratic Party as too progressive on stuff like that?
I don't think people actually are opposed to the policies. I think that it might have contributed to the outcome in that a lot of mean-spirited, hateful people use that as a way to divide and fearmonger. But I'll speak as a gay man. What happened in the gay rights movement is once you realized that you knew someone who was gay, it was harder to demonize them. You realized that it was a cousin or a nephew or a son or a daughter. Many of you have heard about the fact that I've also struggled with addiction. I'm a recovering alcoholic. Over the years, thankfully over the last 10 years particularly, as more people have felt comfortable talking about that, it has destigmatized it. And I would challenge anyone to find a family today that hasn't been touched by addiction. The reality is that America is becoming increasingly diverse, and that our families and our family structures are defined in all different ways. And so I don't reject the policies, the safeguards, the values of the Democratic Party. What I do reject is the other party using it to fearmonger, to scare, and to divide this country. And the best way to get out of that is to lead by example.
Mayor Smiley.
You mentioned the word sanctuary,
Yeah,
and you also talked about protecting immigrants in our city.
yeah.
What does that look like exactly? I mean, like, 'cause we know from 4 years ago what it looked like then. What does it look like now?
So the Providence police are not, should not be, and will not be immigration officers. We know that we have undocumented immigrants in Providence. We are proud of our immigrant community, regardless of their documentation status. And our policy is going to remain the same, which we think is thoughtful and compassionate, which is if you are going about your business, you have no concern that Providence police or law enforcement, empowered by me at least, are going to be asking for paperwork or checking immigration status. Now, if you break the law and you find yourself in prison, that information is shared with the Immigration Service. That was the case before yesterday, and that'll be the case tomorrow. It is then the Immigration Service's decision on whether or not to remove that individual. And we intend to continue to share that information for those who are incarcerated with ICE. But short of that, Providence police are not and should not be immigration officers. And things like providing driver's licenses for undocumented immigrants, which we now do in Rhode Island, and municipal ID cards, which we do here in the city of Providence, are ways in which we can better integrate into our community individuals who are here for a better life, working hard every day, and trying to do the best to create something better for their children.
Do you consider possible retribution from the Trump government if we become what he'll classify as a sanctuary city?
Yeah, I don't know what's going to come. You know, like many of us, we lived through this once before.
Yes.
And I guess one of the benefits of having seen this movie one other time is that it's important not to. I think it's important not to jump to conclusions for what the bluster is before a policy actually comes out, because there's lots of things that get said that don't get followed up upon. And so we'll take that as it comes. But what I won't do is change my values or our city and community's values to adapt to a new Trump administration. Our values are Providence values, and we're going to hold firm to those.
So just to be clear, just going back to what you said with immigration, it sounds like you're against the idea of mass deportations, which has been floated under the Trump administration, but you would still let ICE do its job within the city.
So, yeah, our policy, I do not support mass deportations, first of all. Second of all, if you are in our custody, Providence Police, I don't run the ACI, as you know, the state jail, but if you are in, I know that's the state's policy as well, though. If you are in Providence Police's custody or the ACI's custody, that information is available to ICE. It is their decision to come get the individual or not. And sometimes they do. Historically, the truth is sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. That's their decision. They're the immigration office. If ICE has a known operation in the city, we don't interfere with a law enforcement action from it, just like we wouldn't interfere with an FBI investigation or some other law enforcement agency. But we are not giving them tips or information about where to find undocumented immigrants in the city of Providence.
Mayor, the Democratic Party in Rhode Island, it can be argued, is showing signs of splintering. Organizations like the Democratic Socialist, Working Family Party, Green Party, the uncommitted slate that went to the convention, and particularly the Party for Social Liberation with Claudia de la Cruz, is clearly attracting a great deal of passion from younger Democratic voters. Is the Rhode Island Democratic Party losing young voters, particularly over the Gaza?
That might be a question better for the party itself. I'll speak for myself and my values and my coalition. It is true, I think it was true when I was a young person, that most young voters have either more radical views or experiment with different views. I believe the Rhode Island Democratic Party and Democratic leaders in Rhode Island still appropriately reflect the values and priorities of a majority of Rhode Island voters. And I believe that our coalition is broad, and it includes young people to old people, various faiths, and various races and ethnicities, and various geographies. So I'm not personally concerned about that. We certainly have seen activism within our own party, even on the issue of the war in Israel and what's happening to families in Gaza. But they're still within the Democratic Party, and we have a place for that sort of dissent within our party and a place for a wide variety of viewpoints.
But what do you say to State Representative Enrique Sanchez, who said earlier today that moderates and centrists in the Democratic Party need to either get on board or get out? Like, I think you've described yourself on the radio before as a moderate Democrat, so, there is this fraction that does exist between one section of the Democratic Party and the moderate section, so how does that come together to find an effective winning message?
I think the thing that Enrique and I have most in common is that we're both Democrats, and and that's fine. There's
does it stop there?
No, there's a spectrum in the Republican Party, and there's a spectrum in the Democratic Party. And I think that's fine. It really, despite the fact that I'm deeply disappointed in the outcome yesterday, I don't think anybody's disputing that it was a fair and free election. And that's the beauty of this system. That includes party primaries and constituents, whether you're voting for city council or US Senate and everything in between. They have a chance to vote for what flavor candidate they want within their party. And we're going to continue to advocate and push and pull our party, but do it within the
But isn't there
confines of our
something said
party.
about the success that you're having right now in your administration? Like there was a choice between two more progressive candidates and yourself, and people of Providence chose you as the more moderate candidate because that's the vision that they see for the city. So isn't there something worthwhile listening to some of these more moderate mayors in the state?
I believe so, which is why I continue to try to extol the way in which we're leading here in Providence and the way in which my priorities, I think, are most accurately reflecting the needs of our community. But I do it within the confines of the Democratic Party. I'm proud to be a Democrat, and I expect when I run for re-election in 2 years, I'll run against some other Democrats who feel slightly differently, and we'll have a chance to make that argument. The thing that's most important, and maybe to the previous question, is that we continue to lead with values and priorities and actual solutions. And then the voters have a chance to decide what's going to be best for them and their family.
What would you say to, it's fair to say that a lot of people are upset today in Rhode Island. What would you say to people who are thinking about maybe protesting, the presidential election results?
I think it's fine, and believe me, maybe more in my younger years, I've been to a few protests myself, and I think it's fine for people to feel what they're feeling. But there does come a time where you want to channel that into something more productive. And so this is, in fact, a very emotional time for a lot of people right now. The reason I'm doing this today, I went to bed last night not feeling great about the outcomes, but we didn't know for sure when I went to bed. When I woke up this morning, I had phone calls and texts from constituents and friends and neighbors who were very upset. Then I came to work and walked around City Hall to talk to our employees. There were some tears in the office. People are, in fact, very upset, and I want to recognize and validate and make sure that people know it's okay to feel those feelings. But there will come a time when it's time to get back to work. And so if folks in the Democratic Party feel like they need to go protest, so long as they do so peacefully, I say have at it. But protests alone aren't going to change policy, and it needs to be backed up with good candidates and good policies and real solutions. And here in Providence, we're going to, as I said, try to lead by example in that respect.
Mayor Smiley, let's talk about the impact of the Trump administration on some of the big projects that are ongoing. In particular, the bridge.
Yeah.
Augmented by the fact that obviously Senator Rhode now becomes the ranking Democrat as opposed to the chair of a major committee. Are you worried that some of the federal money that's been offered potentially for bridge repair will be pulled back?
I'm worried that any number of federal investments might be decreased in the future. It took a Biden administration for Infrastructure Week to finally come. And so I am worried about federal grants. I'm worried about a change in federal policy that would affect the city in many, many ways. My goal is to work with the federal government where we agree and then stand up for our values where we don't. Many of you know I'm active with the United States Conference of Mayors. The Mayors Conference, which is a bipartisan conference of mayors from across the country, have identified housing as the top issue facing America's cities. And before yesterday, actually in August, during both conventions, a delegation of mayors went to both conventions, the Republican convention and the Democratic convention, with a policy agenda as proposed by the U.S. Conference of Mayors. That's an area that I'm optimistic that perhaps the Trump administration will embrace and that we could work with them on. And we will happily take federal assistance to meet the housing crisis in Providence, and I know my colleague mayors around the country feel the same way. In ways in which the federal government is not standing up for Providence values, then we will stand strong. And so we're going to take it case by case.
Get back to one more.
In the waning week,
Yes, size.
in the waning weeks of the election, Donald Trump assembled what many folks in the right of center call their dream team: Elon Musk, Ron Paul, Joe Rogan, Tulsi Gabbard, RFK, Thomas Massey. Is that your nightmare team?
I have some real concerns about some members of that team, to be sure. Yeah.
The school committee
Yeah.
with the election. Do you have any opening thoughts on how those elections went?
Yeah.
Who's in there?
So I had a chance to talk to all 5 new school board members today, and they're all very excited about their new service. In addition to congratulating them, I also let them know that we're going to be working with them before getting sworn in January on some basic board development, bring them up to speed. They've been elected now to represent their constituencies, and they're going to advocate for what they think is right for the folks who elected them, but we do want to make sure that we start from the same base of knowledge. One of the hardest things in the education space is it feels like we keep doing the same thing over and over again. And so in an attempt to not repeat the mistakes of the past or start from scratch yet again, we're going to be working closely with them to brief them on the turnaround plan, brief them on the history of how we got to this point, and bring them up to speed for the very important and meaningful pending issues in front of us, and then find a way to move forward. But I'm excited for them. They were full of energy and enthusiasm this morning, and it's a new model for Providence Public Schools, and it's our job to support them to be successful in those new roles.
Just one more. You talked at the beginning about worrying about going backwards, and I guess the conversation on migration could be one of them. What other specific policies of the Trump administration do you point to and say, okay, this is going to directly affect Providence?
Well, I mean, there's some scary things that have been talked about in the health space, the public health space. Some of the proposals that came out of Bobby Kennedy's mouth, if in fact he finds a role into the federal government, I think would be negatively impact the health of our community. And the level of investment that we receive from the federal government is meaningful. And whether it's replacing lead pipes or repairing bridges, there's hundreds of millions of dollars of federal funds flowing into the state of Rhode Island and into the city of Providence right now that is improving the quality of life of our residents. Were those programs to end, or were those programs to be directed in a way that was not fair and equitable, would have a really meaningful impact on our day-to-day life here. The city government cannot pay to repair a bridge. That has to be met with federal highway dollars or with US DOT transportation dollars, for example. As you know, we're a historic city. We've got miles of lead pipe. That needs to be replaced with some sort of national program. If we're really going to solve the housing crisis, it's going to require, we're making progress. We're doing better than any other community in Rhode Island, but the scale of the problem is so great, it needs to be matched with a federal program. So those are the kind of things that I think are most important and are most at risk.